Hey everyone, Sam here, otherwise known as FPL Pricey, and in today's video I'm going to take a look at 7 different, very interesting wildcard differentials that I think are being significantly overlooked ahead of Game Week 6. In the meantime, if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel, that would be greatly appreciated. For now though, let's crack on with the show. So before we get started, one thing to note is all data has been provided by Fantasy Football Hub. It's the final week of getting 50% off there, so if you wanted that offer and you wanted to cash in on that, please do click the link in the description. In the meantime, let's take a look at Fabio Carvalho. New signing for Brentford this season, I think raised quite a few eyebrows. There were obviously a lot of clubs interested going into the transfer deadline, and Brentford seem to have picked themselves up a very talented young player. 4.8 million in FPL as well, so there is the potential for us to do exactly the same. Under 1% ownership. Now that is mainly because we haven't really seen him getting any minutes so far, but Thomas Frank would be forgiven, I think, for letting him spend a few weeks on the sidelines and getting up to scratch with Brentford's system. However, with Johan Wissa out for the long term and Carvalho finally coming into the side after a few game weeks, it does look like now might be the time we'll see a few more minutes for this budget enabler. Now the data's not incredible so far, but it is based off of such few minutes that I really wouldn't be looking at that too significantly just yet. And the fixtures ahead of us look really, really promising. It's the same reason that a lot of us will have Mbeumo locked in on a wild card this week. The fixtures are very, very promising, not just for the next 5 game weeks, but also longer term as well. So don't get me wrong, this is a bit of a punt on minutes, but the talent is there. He was obviously highly rated at Liverpool, played really well for Hull on loan last season, and I can assure you, as a Southampton fan, he was a thorn in our side in the Championship as well. And I do think he's ready to make that step up and play regular minutes for a pretty good Premier League side. Obviously, it's going to take him a little while to get going, but I think those 5 game weeks, we've finally seen him start one of them now. Now could be the time where we see significant minutes for Carvalho, and we know how talented he is. We know that he's got a shot on him. We know that he's a creative threat as well. And I think for a team like Brentford, if he starts to nail down that starting space, at 4.8 million, he could be an absolute steal. So don't get me wrong, he's a differential for a reason. That reason being it is a minutes risk. But if he's going to be your 8th attacker, which I think at that price point is absolutely fine, you can afford a couple of early substitutions or maybe the odd benching here or there, because quite frankly, you're not relying on him every single week. If you need him to come into your side as that 8th attacker because of an injury or because of some rotation, I think the chances of him starting are actually very good. And if he is starting with this sort of run of fixtures and the fact that we know he's a very talented young player, I think he could be significantly underpriced. So I really like him. He could be an alternative to Rodgers if you're not that convinced by him. Or if you wanted to have Rodgers as your 7th attacker starting every week, Carvalho could be another budget enabler in your midfield, and it could enable you to get to a 2nd or a 3rd premium spot. So let me know what you think of Carvalho in the comments below, and let's move over to another very cheap differential enabler in the midfield. So another player in the midfield that I am quite interested in is Tyler Dibbling. Now, obviously, came onto the scene last game week, especially when he performed really well against Ipswich, got the goal, which is obviously what is taking the headlines here. But I can tell you, as a Southampton fan, we've been excited about this young player for many, many years now, or at least it seems that way anyway. The amount of hype he's had in the Southampton ranks over the last couple of seasons has been phenomenal, and it's really good to see him starting to force his way into that starting 11 for Southampton. For what it's worth, he didn't just play well against Ipswich either. He also played very, very well against Man United, and seeing him make his Premier League debut against them, or full debut from the start anyway, was very, very encouraging. He's played well in both games, obviously won the penalty, which unfortunately we missed against Man United, but took on defenders with ease. Obviously, I think it was Dalot that he took on at the time to win the penalty, and was gliding past defenders in the Man United game, doing exactly the same in the Ipswich game. Obviously, it came in clutch with a goal. The data matches that pretty well. 0.32 on the XG per 90 will obviously reflect that one very big chance in the first half anyway. But he is 4.5 million, and if you've got a starting player who's playing a fairly advanced role, even if it's for a weak club like Southampton, at 4.5 million, that is very, very helpful to have. And again, a bit like Carvalho, if you're looking at saving some money with an 8th attacker, I think Dibbling could be another way of unlocking some really important funds in your first 11, in your first team, and just have him sat on the bench most game weeks. As you can see, though, the fixtures in and out aren't too bad. You've got 3 good game weeks in the next 5, with 2 obviously very, very difficult ones that you would have to make sure that you have a plan to bench him in game week 7 against Arsenal away and game week 9 against Man City away. The other game weeks, especially 8 and 10, 2 good home fixtures, and I wouldn't mind starting him in either of those matches. I think the problem with Dibbling is because he's so young and because Southampton have a lot of options in their midfield and attacking ranks, rotation could potentially strike. I think, as a Southampton fan, it would be silly to bench him anytime soon because he's just been so far better than any other of our options in attack so far this season. I think it would be very foolish to have him come out of the side anytime soon. However, all it takes is one bad game week performance and he could be a risk. I think at 4.5 million, it is what it is. You can bench him most game weeks and rely on him here or there in select weeks where you maybe have a 7th attacker with a bad fixture. You could plan it so Dibbling comes in game week 8 or game week 10, for example. Overall, I really like it as an option. I think if you're looking at Rodgers as someone you're not interested in or you need to save that extra 0.6, 0.7, then Dibbling could be that other asset that you could have as your 8th attacker. Let me know who you prefer out of Carvalho or Dibbling as that 8th attacker, if any, or if you prefer to just upgrade that spot to Rodgers and leave it that way. So I won't be talking about too many defenders today, mainly because a lot of us on a wildcard know the majority of the defenders that we're going to own at this point, and I don't think I'm going to be able to convince you of too many differentials that you might want to slot in there. However, one player that is catching my eye and I am slightly interested in as a cheaper differential is Diogo Dalot. Now, he's played 90 minutes week in, week out for Man United so far this season, performed pretty well, barring 1 or 2 little errors here or there. And Man United defensively are looking a little bit more secure than last season. Now, that's not to say that they're going to be watertight, and the next 2 fixtures in particular, Tottenham and Aston Villa, are clearly far from ideal for clean sheet potential. But Dalot does carry some creative threat going forwards, and he is an option if you want to save a little bit of money from a 6 million, or if you want to save money from Porro at 5.6, Dalot could be an option over a longer period of time, and maybe you can bench him for a couple of game weeks to start off with. Now, looking at the next 5, obviously there's a couple of green in there against Brentford and West Ham, followed by Chelsea at home in 10. So as a patch of 5, maybe it's not bad, but it's also definitely not ideal. But what really interests me is over a longer period of time, Man United's fixtures as a set look quite secure. So just as an example, after game week 10, the next 3 fixtures include Leicester, Ipswich and Everton, with 2 home games in there as well. And that takes us all the way to game week 13, which is a very long time frame in FPL terms anyway. By that point, we might have someone else on our radar after game week 13 that could fit in nicely as a sub 5 million option in defence. But until that point, I can see Man United being slightly better defensively than we're used to from seasons past. Obviously, they've strengthened their backline pretty well, and Dalot is about as secure as you get in that backline. He also offers more goal threat than some of the alternatives there, and I also do prefer him over Mazraoui on the other side. Again, I've just got a little bit more confidence in Dalot's goal threat, or at least creative threat, moving forwards over a longer time frame as well. So I'm a bit more confident on Dalot than I am on some of the other 5 million options that we're picking from. And if I was to pick a 5 million option, I would say he's probably the man I would go with at the moment. So another player I think I've heard almost nothing about on a wildcard this game week is Son Heung-min. And at 10 million, he is more expensive. It is going to be more difficult to have him slot into your side on a wildcard. There are, of course, a number of premiums that offer very good value for money at the moment, or at least very good amount of expected points. However, Son isn't far off in those terms either. 31 expected points according to Fantasy Football Hub over the next 5 game weeks on screen. But also longer term, I really like the look of Tottenham's fixtures generally. So if I quickly read out the next 5 after this set of fixtures, it reads Ipswich, followed by Man City away, that's the tough one, followed by Fulham at home, Bournemouth away, Chelsea at home and Southampton away. So over a long period of time, over the next 10 game weeks, taking us all the way to game week 16, I believe, Spurs fixtures from an attacking point of view especially are looking really promising. We also don't know who's on penalties yet for Spurs, but I would be very surprised as it stands if Son doesn't keep penalties, considering he is a talismanic figure. He is also the captain of Spurs and has been taking them successfully since Harry Kane left. The data's been pretty decent as well. Obviously, it's nothing to write home about at this point, but 0.49 XGI per 90 isn't half bad. And 2 goals, 2 assists, 4 attacking returns in the opening 5 game weeks. Not bad either. Overall, I wouldn't necessarily pick him ahead of a Saka or ahead of a Haaland, of course. But if you're looking at a structure that includes 3 premiums, so maybe you were eyeing up Cole Palmer as a 3rd premium, at 0.6 cheaper than Palmer, I actually think I prefer him over a longer time frame, and his minutes are much more secure, or at least it seems that way, based on what we've seen Chelsea do over the first few game weeks. We've seen early substitutions for Palmer, and we've seen a lot of quality on the bench coming on at almost very set moments in the game for the likes of Jackson, for the likes of Palmer. João Felix, for instance, is the one that looks like he's subbing on for Palmer, and Felix has obviously signed with an expectation that he gets good minutes for Chelsea, otherwise he just wouldn't have gone there. So I think that Son offers a little bit more security. We know he can be explosive in patches as well, and over the next 10 game weeks, I really like the run of fixtures. So if you want to just hold on to one of the premiums and just hope that over 10 game weeks they pay off, I would say look no further than Son Heung-min. So we've talked about one Spurs midfielder, and let's talk about another cheaper option who is also even more differential than Son Heung-min. That is James Maddison, who comes in at 7.5 million at the moment. That's an extra 2.5 million saving ahead of Son. Now, going into this season, I don't think he was on many people's radar. He's still only 4.2% owned, of course, but he has started off the season really, really well. And we saw this last year at Spurs as well. He got off to a really hot start. The data looked good, but maybe not quite as good as it does right now. 0.31 XG per 90 matched up with 0.59 XA per 90 is absolutely phenomenal. I think he's in the top 3 at the moment in terms of expected goals or assists per 90 over the first 5 game weeks so far. And we do see these patches of form for James Maddison over several seasons. So this happened at Leicester, it happened at Spurs last season pre-injury, and it does seem to be happening again now. And if you can time those patches of form with Maddison when he's really fit, he looks completely at his best, the returns really do seem to flow. And as I mentioned with Son, the next 10 game weeks for Spurs look absolutely phenomenal as a set. So again, if you want a differential option who has plenty of explosive capability in midfield, James Maddison could be the way to go. Again, the minutes are looking good. He's got plenty of talent ahead of him to assist, so Solanke coming in will be helpful for him. And he is playing in a dual 10 role alongside Kulusevski at the moment as well, giving him perhaps even more creative freedom than we saw last season, where he's playing a more isolated role and he was getting man-marked a little bit more easily. This will be much more difficult for opposition to pick him up on the edge of the box because they're going to have to deal with twice the amount of players in those areas. And if Maddison is able to find those spaces, we know that he's got the capability of picking a really good pass and finding either Son, Brennan Johnson, Solanke. All of these players are going to be good options in and around the box for him to try and pick out. So overall, the data is looking phenomenal. He's at a good price point at 7.5 million and he's differential. So for me, he does tick pretty much all of the boxes as long as he stays fit and firing. So Chris Wood is the differential in this video that I actually do already have in my Wildcard Game Week 6 draft. Obviously, I myself am on a wildcard, and I really like the look of Chris Wood this week. Now, until this point, I was a little bit more hesitant on Chris Wood. I was a little bit nervous about the expected minutes, and I also didn't account for the fact that he might be on penalties. Now, we expected Morgan Gibbs-White to be on penalties. That is not the case. Chris Wood took Nottingham Forest's first penalty this season so far, and I think that just bumps him up in my estimation just enough to put him ahead of the likes of Dominic Calvert-Lewin or João Pedro in that budget forward option, that third forward option that a lot of us are looking to have on a wild card. He is still differential though, so 7.5% ownership, I think for me, is actually quite surprising considering he does tick a lot of the boxes. The other hesitation I already mentioned is the expected minutes. Now, he does have competition up front, and we are still seeing him come off around about the 75th to 80th minute most game weeks. But with data like this, at this price point, I think it's still a risk worth taking. And because he's still playing really well, I would be surprised if he did get fully rotated at any point soon. Now, obviously, Forest don't have European football to worry about. They are going to go game week to game week, basically starting their strongest possible 11. And Chris Wood is absolutely undoubtedly a part of that at the moment. The data's looking strong. The next, not just 5 game weeks, but longer than that as well. I think 8 game weeks is looking really good as a patch of fixtures. Lots of green on the ticker, but 3 really good home games there against Fulham, Crystal Palace and West Ham. And the 2 away games against Chelsea and Leicester, I'm not particularly bothered by either. So overall, if I was looking for a differential striker in that third spot, Chris Wood would be the option to go for. But not only that, I think I would actually put him ahead of some of the more popular picks, like a João Pedro, for instance. Dominic Calvert-Lewin is also fairly differential, but I would put Chris Wood ahead of him as well. So let's wrap up today's differential video with a really out of left field pick, and that is Savinho. I say out of left field, but he is playing off the right for Man City at the moment, and he does seem to be the preferred option for Pep Guardiola so far this season. He's also, on the eye test, been playing really, really well. Positive football, picking spaces in between the lines, obviously got the assist for Haaland in game week 5, and it was a phenomenal pass through. It looks like he's got a real eye for Haaland's runs, which in the past, we've seen the likes of Grealish and Doku really struggle with at times. So Savinho, despite the fact that he is a new signing for City, seems to be fitting into their system really well. And one thing I'd like to note on Man City so far is they seem to be playing with much more emphasis on their wide players in the early game weeks so far this season. Now, every year, Pep seems to tweak 1 or 2 little things to the system to keep the opposition guessing. And I think what we've noticed so far is the wide players are playing a little bit further out, but also taking on the fullbacks more regularly and cutting inside from those positions. If Savinho is trusted down that right wing, which is the gamble here, of course, but if he's backed in that position regularly to take on the player and to win those duels more often than not, we could see someone at 6.5 million who is significantly underpriced. Now, with the fixtures to come, it could be worth taking that risk. Now, it's not just a sea of green for the next 5, it continues after that. And Man City are the team to beat, of course. Now, Arsenal are also the team to beat, but we've just seen them play each other. We don't have to worry about that for a long, long time. So pretty much any fixture that Man City come up against, they're going to be the favourites in between now and after Christmas. So Savinho, if he is a regular starter, okay, he's going to get taken off early sometimes, and he might not play every single game. But the data's already looking fairly encouraging. We've already seen him pick out Haaland on a number of occasions. And those fixtures are great too. So I do like him as a differential option at just 1.3% ownership. I think if I was to try and give a balanced argument at the very end of this video, the problem that we could potentially see is other players coming back to full fitness for Man City. So Foden's coming back in. He started in the midweek fixture. He could be fighting for minutes in the midfield, and that might put Savinho on the right wing in a slight touch of jeopardy as well. Now, we know Foden can play out wide too. I think we've seen Foden play through the centre well enough for long enough that it would be A little bit bizarre to see him start off the right now, so I am fairly confident on Savinho, but it's something that we do need to consider, and it is obviously Pep at the end of the day that we're talking about here, so anything could happen. You can't guarantee any player to be safe outside of maybe Erling Haaland at this point. So overall, it is a risk. 6.5 million is quite a lot of money to take a risk on, but it is Man City. The data is good. We know Savinho is a quality operator, and the fixtures are absolutely phenomenal as well. So if you want an upside, bit of a fire differential to finish this video with, look no further than Savinho. As we do reach the end of the video, I would really appreciate it if you could leave a like and subscribe to the channel. I'm aiming for 100 likes on this video. That would be absolutely amazing if we could get there. So thank you in advance if you're willing to help me out there. And of course, if there are any players that you disagreed with today, or any players that I haven't had time to mention, please do leave them in the comments below, and I'll get back to you before the Game Week 6 deadline. In the meantime, good luck with your wildcarding if you are on a wildcard this game week, and I'll see you later on this week as I lock in my final wildcard draft ahead of Game Week 6.